Imagine this, you're in the kitchen, you just started cooking, somebody walks in and they're like, oh my god, what are you cooking? It smells so good. I'm literally just frying some onions over here. I know you've been there because we all have, and there's a very simple explanation. Humans love eating onions. With over 175 countries growing them, they might easily be the most widely used vegetable in the world. Why? Because they're healthy, they're cheap, they're extremely versatile, and yeah, they just make everything taste better. And so today I want to go over the most common types of onions out there and talk about when and why to use which type of onion. But also, to come back to that delicious fried onion aroma I opened with, I'm going to show you how you can turn any kind of leftover bits and scraps of onion you have into a classic Chinese condiment called Kaamiño, or onion oil, which is essentially just fried onion extract, and this will be your new favorite thing to cook with. But first, let's cover the basics. When we talk about onions, we usually talk about the bulb or the leaves of a vegetable from the allium family. A lot of them are closely related, but to non-biologist humans, the defining feature in all of them is their taste. And interestingly, when you smell a whole onion, you're not actually going to notice much. What we know as the onion taste gets activated once you rupture the cells, for example by cutting or grating an onion. That's when certain enzymes and chemical compounds get released, start doing their magic, and within 20 to 30 seconds, you will be very clearly registering them with your nose and, as we all know, with our eyes. The most important actors here are sulfur compounds, but those are gonna have to come from somewhere, right? And that somewhere is usually the soil the onions are grown in. And in a nutshell, that's the theoretical stuff we should keep in mind. The taste of all these different types of onions depends on A, the variety, and B, the amount of sulfur they absorbed as they grew. And for us as home cooks, that's gonna translate into 3 important questions. 1, how intense and how sharp is the onion? 2, how sweet is the onion? And 3, what is this onion's superpower? Because yes, I do think every different type of onion has a different superpower. Let me explain. We're gonna start with the good old yellow onion. It's pretty pungent and oniony in taste, but not very sweet. Or at least it's not very sweet in its raw form. Generally speaking, the longer you cook onions, the more dramatically their taste will change. In the beginning, they're just gonna get more mellow, but still taste a little bit oniony, but as you keep cooking them, they're gonna get like actually very, very sweet from all the sugar that's trapped within them. But before we get to that, let's talk about texture. Try chopping an onion in half and you will see really clearly how it sort of grows horizontally. This matters because it shows you how the natural grain of the onion is aligned. That in turn should inform your decision on how you cut your onion. If you cut against the grain along the circumference of the onion, you will basically slice through the onion's own structure. You will get these very round half rings, which are all made up of very short fibers. If you cook those, they will get extremely tender and almost melt after a while. They will also have a more intense flavor because remember, the more onion cells we break, the more onion flavor chemistry is gonna happen. That makes these half rings perfect for things like soups and stews or thick gravies, curries, or sauces. But if you cut with the natural grain of the onion, north to south or pole to pole as people like to say, you're gonna get a very different result in the form of onion slivers. If your onions are raw, this will give you a pretty look and a pleasantly crunchy texture. But even when they're cooked, these onions will sort of soften but still hold their shape pretty well. This makes pole-to-pole onion slivers perfect for things like stir fries, but also for, caramelized onions and such. It's also the way to go if you need some raw onions, but then, to be honest, I wouldn't go for yellow onions because that's not their strong suit. They're a little bit too crude for that. But speaking of strengths, I said that every onion has a superpower, remember? Well, so does this one. Yellow onions have incredible durability. They're sometimes even referred to as storage onions. As long as you keep them in a cool, dry, and well-ventilated place, they're gonna last for months. They're also really cheap and work for almost any applications, making them the perfect onion to just have around at all times. But let's move to their popular cousins, the red onion. It's a bit more refined with a very clean and yet super intense aroma. With the red onion, however, this intensity is balanced by a lot of sweetness as well. It's totally cool to cook with red onions, by all means go for it, but I really think they shine when you don't take them too far. I mean, they're pretty great eaten raw, even though they might still be a little bit too sharp for some people, but fortunately there are at least 2 things you can do about that. Here's a quick experiment. Chop up a red onion, slice it pole to pole into slivers. Cover one half with hot, almost boiling water, and for the other half, add a pinch of salt, pinch of sugar, and cover with balsamic vinegar. Give both a good mix and let them soak for about 15 minutes. The hot water onions will get significantly less sharp in taste, but still have everything you love about raw onions. That's a trick I learned in Uzbekistan. And the vinegar onions, they almost turn into kind of an instant pickle. Tangy, sweet, and assertive without tasting too oniony. Both of these work amazingly well in salads or as a topping for sandwiches, tacos, pizza, you name it. Fascinating, but what is their superpower? Well, thanks for asking. That would surely be their color. Yes. The way your food looks is absolutely gonna affect how much people like it, and brightening things up with a few specks of purple and white is absolutely gonna go a long way. But now let's take it really easy on the palate for a bit and try mild onions. There are different varieties like white onions or this gigantic Spanish sweet onion, but they all have one thing in common. They're low on the sulfur side, making them as mellow as onions get, and on the other hand, they're pretty sweet even in their uncooked form. When you cut them in quarters, they make fantastic fillers for your barbecue skewers. But what I would call their superpower is that they're the perfect onions for 100% raw consumption. Just dice them up and sprinkle them over tacos, over meat, or use them as a bright topping for soups, bowls, you name it. There is one more onion from the bulb category we need to talk about, and that's not actually an onion, it's a shallot. I mean, they're close relatives, and in terms of intensity and sweetness, I find them very similar to red onions, but they do have a distinct superpower. They taste more delicate and refined with an almost like garlicky side note. And then of course there's the form factor. Shallots tend to be small and lengthy, so when you dice them up carefully, you get these cute tiny little cubes, allowing for very subtle and even flavor distribution. That can come in super handy when you're just trying to add a little bit of kick to your mayo, sour cream, or any other sauce for that matter. Or dips, actually. I love tiny bits of shallots in dips. One of my favorite ways to use them, however, has gotta be making crispy fried shallots, which is a super popular thing in Southeast Asia. Let me show you how to do that. But first we need to peel shallots, which you will very soon realize is a huge pain in the ass. But don't fret, Oppa is here to help. What you want to do is simply cover your shallots with boiling water in a heat-proof bowl and let those sit for 5 minutes. Don't worry, nothing's gonna happen to the flavor, or not much, but their skin is gonna soften, and peeling even a whole bunch of shallots will be like 1,000 times faster and cleaner. Slice your shallots into rings, trying to maintain an even thickness, then drop those into a pan, nothing too shallow, and cover with neutral oil like canola, peanut, or whatever. First set your stove to medium, and then once it starts bubbling, go down to medium-low and keep simmering and stirring occasionally. This is gonna take a while, easily 20 minutes or more, but you need to go low and slow if you want to achieve even crispness without bitter, burnt shallot pieces. Patience really pays off here, guys. Once they look like this, strain, shake off the excess oil, and spread them out on a kitchen towel to dry and cool down, which is when they will turn firm, light, and crispy. Once completely cool, keep those in an airtight jar and sprinkle over anything, really. They're basically the bacon of vegetables. But hey, don't throw out all that delicious shallot-infused oil. This side product is already a fantastic thing to cook with, but we will get back to that later when we make a big batch of our all-onion oil in a bit. Before we do that, we gotta talk about green onions though. They're pretty much just regular onions that have been harvested early, before they grew a pair of bulbs. And yes, there's technically a difference between scallions with a narrow bottom and spring onions with little bulbs at the bottom, but honestly, if you ask me, I think you can totally use those interchangeably. Both are gonna be just moderately intense in flavor, not very sweet, but equipped with the superpower of freshness. Thinly sliced, you can add a zingy note to any heavy and rich meal to balance even the strongest of umami bombs. But actually, I would view the two different colored halves as different things. The whites have a deeper flavor and are great for making soup or stock, while the greens bring brightness and sharpness. Of course, their color does a lot as well in terms of visual appeal or contrast when you use them as a garnish. And speaking of garnish, if you want to be a little extra, try cutting the scallions into segments, slice them as thinly as you possibly can but lengthwise, then drop them into an ice bath. Within a few minutes, they will curl up and look real pretty when you're trying to impress someone with your cooking on your next date night. Oh, but please do me a favor and don't confuse spring onions with chives. Chives are basically the shallots of the green onion world. They're a different plant with a similar but more delicate and refined taste, and being much smaller in diameter, they're a great way to get even allium flavor into your sauces and dips, for example, and they work perfectly as a garnish. Another often misunderstood green onion cousin is the leek. I know leeks kind of look like green onions on steroids, but they're actually a different plant with a slightly different flavor profile. They're definitely on the mild side, but can still give you a rich umami base with a delicious sweet undertone. While their green tops do have pretty good flavor, they also have a really rough texture, so they're kind of best used to make stock or something like that. The white bottoms though, those can be used in a whole bunch of different dishes. I actually recommend cutting them into thick segments, which I promise are totally good to use as a hero ingredient in its own right. Try braising that with miso and honey, for example, or baking that with ham and cheese. Get creative. But finally, I did promise to show you how to make onion oil. I'm not kidding you, this is a very well-known thing in Chinese cuisine and it's extremely flavorsome. You can totally use this just the way you would use any other cooking oil, except this one is already pre-packed with delicious fried onion aroma, and that's gonna take all your cooking to the next level, I promise. The good news is that the process of making onion oil is extremely simple and also smells very good. Simply drop a very large amount of whatever types of onions you can get your hands on, even scraps and leftovers, into a large pot. Cover with neutral oil like canola, peanut, or whatever. I'm actually using all the demo pieces from this video, which is perfect. Different types of onions will give different nuances. Set your stove to medium and let this come up to a simmer. Stir every 5 to 10 minutes or so and keep doing that for as long as it takes. I'm sorry to say, and that's the small piece of bad news here, this might take quite a while. In my case, I think it was close to 1.5 hours. But for the best flavor, you really want to take your onions to a deeply caramelized state. Don't forget to stir occasionally, but do stop immediately if you notice that the first onions are about to turn black. Finally, pass through a fine mesh strainer into a heat-proof vessel and, unlike me, don't be a fool, let this cool before bottling. Seriously guys, the depth of this oil is incredible, and once you've gone through the process, you can make any savory dish taste a ton better without putting in any further work. Also, this should last for a very long time. So I hope you learned something about onions in this video, and guys, seriously, I can't say this enough. Try making the onion oil and let me know how you like it. I'll see you in the next video.